Cartels have been a major problem in Mexico for years. There's cartels like the Sinaloa cartel, ran by El Chapo, and Los Zetas. These cartels fight for control, but one cartel is coming in and putting its foot down like no other. This is known as the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, or CJNG for short. This cartel is bringing the level of violence and drugs and fear to a whole nother level. The leader of this cartel is Mexico's most wanted man, with a $10 million bounty on his head. Namiso Alciguera Cervantes, who goes by El Mencho. El Mencho is one of Mexico's richest men, but also an extremely violent and ruthless man. El Mencho's life was not always like this. He grew up as an impoverished avocado farmer, however he wanted a lot more. El Mencho was born on July 17, 1966 in Michoacan, Mexico to a family of poor avocado farmers. Despite the word getting other avocados from these areas due to the climate, El Mencho's family struggled to make ends meet, and El Mencho felt like his whole life was going to be a struggling farmer. Despite avocado farming being a noble profession, the cartel was heavily involved in avocado distribution and wanted their cut from their profits. This meant El Mencho was exposed to lots of cartel violence as a young kid, leaving deep-rooted scars in him. El Mencho left school in the 5th grade working on an avocado farm full-time. He quickly found out the avocado farm he was working at wasn't just an ordinary farm. It was a front for the Millennial Cartel, which had a lot of power in the area at the time. The cartel would smuggle marijuana into boxes of avocados going into the USA. El Mencho kept working on the farm as he helped smuggle these boxes of marijuana and avocados into the USA. El Mencho worked his way up and eventually became a watchman and a drug trafficker, despite only working on a farm. But when he was 19, he realized he wanted a lot more and moved to the USA. He illegally emigrated to Northern California. Things started to get very dark when he made this move. He realized the drug market in California was leaning towards harder drugs like heroin and meth, and got himself involved in that. Things started to get worse for him as he was arrested very soon for carrying an unregistered firearm. A few years after this, he was arrested for drug trafficking. El Mencho was an illegal alien in the USA, which meant he was deported shortly after. However, this would not stop him. El Mencho was too ambitious to stay in Mexico. He went back over to California illegally, of course, and was arrested again when he went to a botched drug deal. El Mencho and his blood brother Ibrahim had a drug deal set up. At the deal, they handed over the drugs. When the buyer handed over the money, it was perfectly stacked bills. This spooked El Mencho, as he was used to the buyers not being so sophisticated. El Mencho then told his brother Ibrahim to cut business with these buyers, but it was already too late. El Mencho and his brother were wiretapped, and the police arrested them shortly after. Even at a young age, El Mencho was smart enough to point out things like this about police. El Mencho ended up pleading guilty to this charge, which meant his brother would get off the hook. El Mencho then was sentenced to 5 years in prison, but only did 3 years on good behavior. Once again, he was deported after this, but this time he decided to stay in Mexico. He realized how easy it was to be caught for illegal activity in California, and how Mexico was much more lawless, and he could get away with his illegal endeavors. Once he got back to Mexico, he got his job back at the avocado farm, where he was working under the Millennial Cartel again. This time he had a different kind of job. This job he had to get his hands dirty. And no, I don't mean dirty within the farm. His job was to protect a drug lord known as El Maradona. El Maradona was eventually arrested, which made the Millennial Cartel vulnerable. This is when the cartel Los Zetas started to take control of the area. See, Los Zetas were kind of different. They were a paramilitary-style cartel, with many of their members being military trained. A lot of these men were in the military but left that life behind and started working for Los Zetas. These weren't just street thugs that banded together, these were highly trained soldiers acting as killing machines. They were super violent, even handing out medals to cartel members who were the most violent. In a way, Los Zetas were inspirational for other cartels. Cartels would now stop being scary-looking thugs and started taking a more professional approach with a paramilitary style. But these soldiers weren't tasked with protecting countries, they were tasked with doing the devil's work. Anyway, El Mencho, seeing all this, made him have a moment with himself. He realized how the Los Zetas were going to take out the Millennial Cartel if nothing happened. So he left to go to Guadalajara, where he met El Chapo. At the time, El Chapo was one of the most powerful cartel leaders in Mexico. Therefore, he went there to strike a deal with the Sinaloa cartel. Shortly after this, in 2009, the Millennial Cartel started falling apart. The boss was arrested and the Millennial Cartel had no leadership. Just a side note, cartels need leadership. Usually when a boss of a cartel is arrested or killed, the cartel starts to fall apart as there's no direction. Oftentimes rival cartels swoop in and try to recruit the members of the cartel if there's no one to guide them anymore. Think of a human body. For an example, with the cartel boss being the head. Once the head is deteriorated, the rest of the body fails. Same with cartels with no brains behind the operation. It fails. That's why when rival cartels or police go after a cartel, they usually aim for the head. Anyway, El Mencho, being the opportunist he is, seeing the boss of the Millennial Cartel be arrested, El Mencho swooped in and took the former boss's place. Well, this move pissed off a lot of people. Some members of the cartel accepted it. Other folks in the cartel felt like they should have been the boss. This power struggle made the Millennial Cartel split into two factions. One faction being La Resistencia and the other Los Matazetas, aka the Zeta Killers, which El Mencho was the leader of. This is when El Mencho started thriving, taking the cartel violence to a whole nother level. Very quickly, La Resistencia was torn apart by El Mencho. Considering El Mencho was very familiar with both sides of the cartel, he had lots of info about La Resistencia and gave it over to the police. So not only was La Resistencia being aggressively attacked by Los Matazetas, but the police were coming down on them just as hard. Yes, El Mencho plays very dirty. Even for the ruthless word of the cartel, this is seen as dirty. El Mencho applied one more tactic to finish off La Resistencia. He would spread propaganda about them, claiming they would attack and kidnap innocent civilians. Then made it seem like Los Matazetas were only in it to take down La Resistencia and make a cleaner and safer Mexico. At one point, El Mencho exposed politicians and police officers that had an alliance with La Resistencia. This earned El Mencho a lot of trust with the general public and made Los Matazetas look like the good guys. With all this, La Resistencia didn't stand a chance against El Mencho. Just a year later in 2010, El Mencho felt like it was time for a rebrand and turned his cartel into a new cartel known as Jalisco New Generation Cartel. CJNG quickly went from being a small cartel to one of the biggest cartels in Mexico. He took a lot of inspiration from Los Zetas and assembled his cartel in military style. His cartel members dressed with full body armor, used military-style weapons like assault rifles with grenade launchers, and drove in tanks and trucks. This scared the shit out of other cartels, as you can probably imagine. See, El Mencho was a smart man. A lot of the profits he made would go right back into the equipment for his cartel to intimidate other cartels. The more fear he put in other cartels, the more land he had, which means he can operate and make greater profits. El Mencho would also go out of his way to hire the worst people he could find in Mexico. At one point, he hired a man known as El Payaso. El Payaso used to work at a circus as a clown, entertaining families and children. But now, El Payaso worked for El Mencho as a killing machine. However, he never took off the mask. El Mencho liked how twisted it was for El Payaso to be a killer while wearing a clown mask. If this isn't creepy enough, El Payaso was also one of the most violent members with an extremely gruesome methods for torturing his victims. El Payaso also worked around with other cartel members who all had similar clown masks. These killer clowns are responsible for many of the gruesome cartel videos on the internet. I'm not going to break down what goes on in these videos, but if you want to watch them, they're easy to find. El Mencho would encourage the clowns to make these videos while wearing the masks to instill fear in their rivals. At one point in 2011, CJNG took it upon themselves to send a message to one of their rivals, Los Zetas. 2 trucks were found under an underpass containing 35 dead bodies. All the bodies had signs of torture, including their hands tied behind their backs. With further investigation, it was found these bodies belonged to Los Zetas members. There was a note also attached to the truck stating, "This will happen to all Los Zetas members and any politicians that have an alliance with them." At one point, CJNG even attacked the Mexican army. There was a Mexican army helicopter patrolling the area that CJNG felt like it was there for them. The CJNG shot a rocket launcher and it resulting in decimating the helicopter and killing 9 soldiers. There was really no one the CJNG wouldn't go after, even threatening famous Mexican artist Peso Pluma. Peso Pluma had made a mistake of making music praising El Mencho's biggest rival, El Chapo. Because of this, CJNG put up a sign in Tijuana stating if Peso Pluma performed his music in Tijuana, Mexico, it would be his last show. El Mencho even had the Mexican police in his pocket. In an infamous phone call, El Mencho can be heard yelling at the police, telling them to stop going after his men. The police apologize profusely and tell his men to leave the CJNG alone. Just think about that for a second. El Mencho has more power than the police. The Mexican police would put their tail between their legs anytime El Mencho gave orders. Here's a clip of that phone call.
Delta 1.
Hey, ¿quién habla?
Mira bien, hijo de tu puta madre. Soy Mencho, güey.
¿Cómo?
Relaja tu puta gente a la verga. Soy Mencho, güey. Relaja tus putas partidas. Si no te voy a partir tu madre, tienes toda tu bola de perros. Te tengo identificados 30 güeyes. Hasta tus putos perros te voy a matar si no te relajas, güey. ¿Cómo ves?
Ya está, señor, ahorita los bajo.
Oh, no cuelgues, hijo de la verga. Te
No.
tengo ubicados en Chacala, güey.
No le estoy colgando, le estoy diciendo, ahorita los bajo.
Póngase bien las pilas, güey. ¿Ves que le puedes hacer amigo, cabrón? ¿Uno no se mete con ustedes para que se pasen de verga?
No, señor, ahorita yo se las bajo.
Pongan, mire, revíremeles a todos los hijos de su...
You can see in the phone call, El Mencho mentions he paid the police to turn a blind eye to him and his cartel. He also threatened the police with violence if they don't listen to his demands. Just because of this, El Mencho made the murder rate skyrocket in Mexico between 2010 and 2017. This resulted in El Mencho's being Mexico's most wanted man. Eventually, the DEA put a bounty on his head, offering anyone $10 million if they help him find El Mencho. No one has come through with any information on him. This is mainly because El Mencho keeps a very low profile, hiding away in Mexico and not going out much. Despite having a net worth of over $1 billion, he never flaunts his wealth or power. However, there is one twist that might change everything. There is rumors that El Mencho's dead. Yes, some people believe El Mencho has already died from natural causes, however there's no confirmation. El Mencho was suffering from a kidney disease for years and was being treated at a private hospital. Eventually, El Mencho stopped going to that hospital. That's when the rumors came about him being dead, but like I said, nothing's confirmed. Despite this, the CJNG is running strong and remains one of the strongest cartels in the world. Thanks for watching.